Hi, my name is Jenny Valite, and today we will be talking about open source. We will discuss what open source software is, how it is used, the different types of software, the benefits of open source, and the disadvantages of open source as well. Open source software is also known as OSS. Open source software is software with a source code that anyone can inspect, modify, and enhance. The source code is something the user doesn't usually see. It is the code that computer programs can manipulate to change how a piece of software, a program, or even an application works. These computer programmers can change these programs to improve them or fix things that aren't working properly. Open source software can sometimes be referred to as free software. Although open source applications are usually free, that's not what free refers to. Technically, programmers and developers could charge for copies of the software if they really wanted to. The freeness of open source refers to the ethics and the morals of using software that can be modified and changed by the actual users. So the free stands for user freedom, not really the monetary aspect. There are a plethora of reasons people like using open source. People appreciate open source because of the control, the training, the security, and the stability that it comes with. When using open source, people have more control over the software. They can look into the code to make sure it isn't changing in a way they don't want it to, and they can change it themselves if they don't like the way it's working. They can use this software in any way that they wish. This can be compared to proprietary software, which is owned by an individual or a company that developed it. There are almost always major restrictions on its use, and its source code is usually kept a secret, unlike how it is with open source software. Another benefit of using open source is that it helps you become a better programmer. Open source code is open to the public, so many people can study it and learn how to make better software. People who are learning how to use open source can invite others to critique their programming so that they can learn from the mistakes they make. Training is also a very important part of open source. Open source can require a lot of technical know-how, so you need to put time and effort into learning how to use it or training the employees if you're using it for business purposes. Many people consider open source software to be more secure than other softwares. Since anyone can view and modify open source software, people might spot and correct errors that a programmer might have made. The software can be fixed, updated, and upgraded more quickly than normal softwares can. A multitude of users also like open source compared to other softwares for long-term project use. Programmers publicly distribute the source code for open source software, so users that rely on the software for important tasks can be certain that their tools won't disappear on them or stop working if their original creator stops working on them. There are many different licenses that developers use in open source projects. So many programmers use the GPL, or the General Public License. These include licenses such as Linux, which we will discuss on a later slide. General Public License means that if anyone modifies or changes open source code, they must distribute that source code. So no one can take an open source code and produce a closed source code from it. They must release the information to the public. They can't keep it private. So as I mentioned earlier, Linux is a very popular open source that people use. Linux was released as freely modifiable source code in 1991. Linux is the most well-known and most widely used open source code operating system. Linux is software that sits underneath all the other software on a computer. It receives requests from those programs and it relays these requests to the computer's hardware. Linux is similar to other operating systems you may have used before, such as Windows, OS X, or iOS. Linux has a graphical interface like certain softwares that most people are accustomed to using on their other operating systems, such as Word and processing applications. Despite all the positives to using open source technology, there are a few drawbacks. While open source has a multitude of attractive features, it also has some drawbacks. There is no requirement to create a commercial product that will sell and make money, so open source tends to develop more in line with the programmer's wishes instead of the needs of the users. They can also be less user-friendly because less attention is paid to the user needs. There also may be less support available when things go astray. Open source relies heavily on its community users to fix problems, and they do not always have the answer. While open source software is generally free, there can still be some indirect costs involved. For example, paying for external support can cost money. While the benefit of open source is that many people can find bugs and fix them, it also means that users can also view those same codes and they could exploit any possible vulnerabilities. The inventors of open source built much of the internet itself on open source technologies like the Linux operating system and even the Apache web server application. So anyone using the internet can benefit from OSS. Every single time someone using a computer views a website or checks their email, maybe chats with a friend or streams music online, plays a multiplayer video game, their computers, cell phones, or gaming consoles connect to a global network of computers using open source software to route and transmit their data to the local devices they're currently using. The Linux operating system is more stable, reliable, and secure with the ability to start and stop services independently of the operating system. In an earlier video I made, I talked in detail about cloud computing. Cloud computing platforms can be open source or closed source. OpenStack is a common example of an open source cloud computing system. Overall, open source software was established to allow flexibility and freedom for all of its users. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed watching.